Welcome to RVCC Online, the digital campus of Rainier View Christian Church. My name is Mike Parejo, and I'm the digital ministry pastor here at RVCC. Now, I'd like to direct your attention to the QR code on your screen. That will take you to the homepage of our digital campus. The link can also be found in the YouTube video description. Now, once you click through, you're going to find several great resources, including a guide to taking communion in your home and the link for our brand new podcast. This is also where you can access our digital connection card. Now, speaking of the connection card, we would really like to know that you're watching today. We'd appreciate it if you took just 30 seconds to fill it out. And this is also the way that you can let us know how we can be praying for you this week. If you're part of our Sunday morning interactive service, a link is going to pop up in the chat. Now, if you've never filled out a Rainier View connection card at any of our campuses before, and you do so today, I would love to email you a Starbucks e-gift card just to say thank you for being here. We'll be reading from the Bible during today's message. If you don't own a Bible, I encourage you to download the free YouVersion Bible app on your phone or your tablet. There are a ton of great Bible reading plans for adults, students, and even kids. Finally, if you're watching during our Sunday morning interactive chat service, our chat hosts are available to pray with you anytime during the service. If you click on the request prayer button, a private chat box will open and one of us will be honored to pray for you. Now, if you'd like to join us in person, we have live services every Sunday morning at our Parkland and Grand campuses. Our in-person services include a time to experience communion together, as well as some additional worship songs. There's also full programming for children and opportunities for students to connect with one another. You can go to rainierview.org/in-person to learn more. Thank you again for being part of RVCC Online, and let's begin our worship service together.
And welcome to Rainier View. My name is Crystal, and we're so glad you're joining us today. Let's join Jeff as we look to answer the question, am I living the good life?
New construction is always a bit of a fascinating process for me to examine from the outside looking in, because you'll see a foundation that gets poured and then sometimes not a lot of activity is happening, at least again from the outside looking in. And then all of a sudden, one day there's a bunch of walls that go up, and then again, not a lot of activity from the outside looking in. And then sometimes almost seemingly overnight, paint goes up, siding, windows, doors, and all of a sudden a brand new home, a brand new business has been created and it's ready to be used. You know, I think a new build has a lot to teach us about what it means to follow Jesus, actually. And we're gonna be looking at a parable today that is talking about building upon the right foundation in our lives. And so we're doing this as we kick off our new series, Don't Miss It. And actually, this is kind of part of a series we did a few months back called Good News for Everyone, where we looked at the Gospel of Luke. And we saw that the good news of Jesus wasn't just something for some people, a handful of people, but Jesus came to bring good news for everyone. And we took the time to look at the Gospel of Luke, the life and the teachings of Jesus, but now we're coming back to a section that we left out, this section on these parables. Parables were these short stories that Jesus would tell with a singular point. And they weren't just like itty-bitty fairy tales with a little kind of fortune cookie ending. They actually are calls to action. They're calls to live differently as a result of embracing a singular truth in our lives. And here's the thing, we can miss that so often, because life change demands something of us. If we're gonna embrace the teaching that Jesus has for us in these parables, in these short stories, it's gonna demand action in our lives. We're gonna have to make a choice more than just checking a box marked Christian or praying a prayer at some point in time or coming to some services on a Sunday morning at a church. To live out the teachings of Jesus is gonna require us something. It's gonna require something of us. Demand something of us. Because the thing is, the way that we live on our own is not the way that Jesus invites us to live. The kind of life that Jesus invites you and I to live, it's not normal. It's not normative at all. It is very different. And it's very different than what the world often calls the good life. those things that we're supposed to chase after, that are going to bring us happiness or fulfillment or meaning, that so often leave us empty. And Jesus challenges us with a different way of living that we see lived out in these parables. And so we promise that as you join us for this series, that as we look at one singular principle from a parable each week, that we can experience a different way to live, that we can experience a different kind of life, the kind of life that we often talk about, that we want, but so often it eludes us. We want a life filled with more meaning, but we're not sure where to begin to experience that. We want to be less anxious. We want to be less angry, yet those things continue to just be almost ever present in our lives. We want to experience a greater sense of patience or peace. All these qualities that so often elude us, the good life that the world talks about can't give to us. But Jesus offers us something different. And so how do we begin living out a truly good life? It depends with how we define the word good. How do we actually define that? And so if you are joining us and you're not yet following Jesus, we want you to know that this series is for you. Because from the vantage point that, again, Jesus invites us to live life, he's inviting us to build upon a different foundation, a different starting point to experience different qualities. Maybe you're not there yet, but we want you to experience and listen to what Jesus has to say, because it'll provide a different foundation for your life. Now, maybe some of you, you've been following Jesus. And we're going to encourage you and challenge you in this series to examine, hey, has what you're building your life on, has it shifted? Like, have you been adjacent to the foundation, but not necessarily quite building on it? Because here's the thing, even building with the right materials, but not on the foundation, that's going to lead to catastrophe. That's going to lead to a collapse at some point in your life. And we don't want that to happen. We don't want your life to look like this, okay? We don't want you to go sideways. We want you to be able to stand up under the pressure, under anything that life gives you. And so let's examine this foundation that Jesus talks about. I'm going to read out of Luke chapter 6, beginning in verse 46. Would you read with me? It says, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? As for everyone who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice, I will show you what they are like. They're like a man building a house who dug down deep and laid the foundation on rock. When a flood came, the torrent struck that house, but could not shake it because it was well built. But the one who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. The moment the torrent struck that house, it collapsed, and its destruction was complete." You know, this is a closing segment of Jesus' teaching that he would have gone around over 2,000 years ago and taught to crowds. And there would have been a very common set of teaching. And this line was how he closed out this teaching. This was Jesus' kind of mic drop moment. And you can get a sample of the kind of life that Jesus invites us to live by just reading just Luke chapter 6. You can see that it's a very different life than the way we choose to live naturally. For instance, you see a radical call to forgiveness, to forgiving those who have hurt us. We see a call to make life about the service of others, to die to our own selfish desires, to bless those that we might consider enemies rather than curse them. And on it goes. And it goes back to that question, how do I know that I'm living a good life? How do I go about answering that? Well, maybe you buy into the idea that the world continues to promote that you or that I or that some collective we, that we get to determine what is true for ourselves. Okay, it's very prevalent in our world. The idea that really there's no absolute truth, that everybody needs to answer the question of what is true for them, often by looking within ourselves. And here's the thing, we're not going to get into a full-blown discussion of like how we know what true is, and it's not a matrix thing like red pill, blue pill, take one. We're not going there, but I do want to speak to what I believe that many of us sense. We have a sense of just relying on myself to determine what is good, what is true, what is right, that ultimately leads me to living a foundationless life, a foundationless kind of life. That it sounds good at first to come up with my own rules, my own sense of what's right and wrong, but ultimately that leads me to a place of frustration, of emptiness, and of hopelessness when it's all on me to determine that. And so what we want you to not miss in this parable, don't miss it, is that you need to build the foundation of your life on something bigger than yourself. that you and I need to build our lives upon a foundation that is bigger than ourselves. Now, at first, living however you want and making up your own rules, that's more freeing at first. It sounds great, and we're setting out like it's a good way to live. But ultimately, you end up drifting through life. And there's a question that keeps popping up that keeps chewing away at you if you're being honest with yourself, I believe, when you just make your own rules for life. It's the question, is this all there is to life? There has to be more than this, right? I believe this question can haunt us because as a pastor, I've seen this happen again and again. Somebody embraces faith in their life for a season, but then they step away from it because there's personal pain in their life that they can't reconcile with God being good. Or, if you're just being honest, you want to pursue some version of pleasure or happiness on your own terms and you don't want anyone boxing you in. And here's the thing, this question cannot be eluded by another hookup. It can't be drowned out with enough drinking or enough distractions. It can't be proven by trying to bring up the receipts on our Instagram account that tell us, I am living a good life. I am living that out. I am a good person. All of those things, they come up short. Because here's the thing, if I am determining what is good, what is true in my life, then the boundary markers for that are always shifting. They're always moving around based upon the circumstances of my life, based upon who I'm with at the time, based upon, even worse, the mood that I am in that day. And Jesus tells us plainly that living this way is like building a house without building a foundation first. It is going to lead to results that you and I don't want to experience. And I'm talking about being able to state if there's any semblance, any sense of bedrock truth. How do we know what's right and wrong? You know, it's interesting in the documentary, Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, that Tristan Harris was talking a lot in that documentary about the harm and the unintended negative consequences of the algorithms that social media uses in our lives when we choose to engage in those platforms. And he has a quote halfway through that just almost knocked me off my chair, how countercultural it was. He says this, he says, if we don't agree on what is true or that there's such a thing as truth, we're toast. This is the problem beneath other problems, because if we don't agree on what's true, then we can't navigate out of any of our problems. You know, in a day and age where algorithms are feeding us different versions of what is true and not true, we more than ever need to be in real relationships with each other to answer this question of what is true. Pilate, the Roman consul who oversaw the trial of Jesus that led to Jesus' crucifixion, over 2,000 years ago at that trial, he asks a very simple question. What is truth? And 2,000 years later, we are still asking that question. What is truth? Every generation needs to answer it. Our problem is that we have an omnipresent Pilate in our pockets, constantly pinging us with that question, but it's giving us all very different answers to the question. And so we do need to acknowledge that on some level, the various households we were raised in, where we've lived, the collection of our own personal experiences leads to some different viewpoints and some different beliefs that we hold, okay? But what is unfortunate is that sometimes that leads me to believe then, or us to believe, that ultimately all truth is relative, that we are just, there's nothing that is bedrock truth. Now, again, in some sense, some things are relative. Think about this. Okay, for me, mayonnaise is disgusting, okay? Some of you want to fight me on that, okay? But it's like, eggy fat that I squeeze out of a bottle. Pfft, yum, I can't wait to eat that sandwich. For me, like, it's true that mayonnaise is disgusting. You can't convince me otherwise. Now, that truth is based probably on some sort of childhood experience eating something that I, thought was disgusting, and maybe my own sense of smell factoring into that. Just like for you, knowing that I love to drink coffee, and you're like, that's gross. You drink hot dirt water every morning, right? Those perspectives are true for you and for I. But here's the thing. If we then take that to say that there's nothing that is foundational, there's nothing that is bedrock, everything is relative, then you and I can never make any moral judgments on what is right or wrong. And this kind of relativistic thinking, by the way, is, I believe, fueling the rise in extreme views in our world. Like, why do we know people that are embracing QAnon as a way to view life and think that there's some deep state conspiracy and there's actors and there's crazy plots and that they really believe it? Or that there's people who literally believe that the earth is flat? Or we're seeing a spike, a rise in neo-Nazi racist ideology being embraced. And like, why is this going on in our world? I believe it's because when people feel like they are adrift, when there's nothing that they can cling to, they will grab hold of anything to make sure that they feel like they're staying afloat. And if I or some group of individuals ultimately get to decide what is true for ourselves, then you and I can never say that something is truly morally wrong. That means that theft, that rape, that genocide, murder, none of those things are actually morally wrong then. It's just unfortunate that it happened to certain people. But let me start with a less extreme example of that. I'm gonna call it the illegal dumpster drop parable. A couple of years back, I was pulling into our church campus, the one I work at, and there's kind of a long driveway, and I'm pulling in the morning, and I see at the end of this driveway that there looks like a giant mountain of debris. And I got closer, and it looked like somebody had knocked down a small house, collected it, and dumped it at the end of our driveway, and left a giant hydraulic slick of oil on the way out for good measure. So it's a fun way to start the day, like, okay, well, what am I gonna do? But what was interesting about the illegal dumpster drop moment was that it wasn't us as a church staff that was the most upset about this. Like, our neighbors came out, and some of them were enraged. They were furious. They couldn't believe that somebody did this. They're digging through the rubble. It's like CSI Graham, and they're trying to find clues, and they're looking, oh, I found a receipt, and like, I think some guy was dusting for prints. Like, they were taking it seriously. Then on some of those, online community pages like nextdoor.com, multiple people were like, I hope that the warm place in hell is reserved for the people who did this. And I was like, I didn't realize that this was the unforgivable sin, like dumping waste illegally on a church property. And here's the thing, nobody seemed to think that this was the right thing to do, to the point that even our local news station, Cairo 7, came out and covered this as one of those small, like, puff piece news stories towards the end of the broadcast. Remember those good old days when there could just be like puff pieces in the news because there wasn't that much going on? Maybe we can get back to that one day. But here's the thing. I think even the individuals, even the dumpies who dumped this waste on our property, they probably knew that they shouldn't have done it. They probably knew that. But here's the thing. In the moment, it just happened to be more convenient for them to go ahead and live this way, to drop this stuff here. And so this is why we need a foundation to build our lives around for our decision making and our thinking that is constant, that is bigger than ourselves, because you and I will engage in our own forms of illegal dumpster drop activity. We just will. We'll create exceptions for ourselves in moments that we do that. And so I want you to hear the words of this parable in Eugene Peterson's paraphrase, the message of Jesus' parable here. Listen to how he describes Jesus' words. He says, if you work the words into your life, you are like a smart carpenter who dug deep and laid the foundation of his house on bedrock. When the river burst and its banks crashed against the house, nothing could shake it. It was built to last. But if you use my words in Bible studies and don't work them into your life, you are like a dumb carpenter who built a house but skipped the foundation. When the swollen river came crashing in, it collapsed like a house of cards. It was a total loss. It is so obvious that you and I need a solid foundation to build our lives around, something constant. And here's the thing, following in the way of Jesus, it gives us a track record of 2,000 years of something certain, something solid, something secure to build our lives on that brings good not only to our lives, but to the lives of other people. But it's not enough just to know about the foundation. It's not enough just to be close to the foundation. We need to dig into the practices, into the things that Jesus asks us to think and the practices he asks us to live out of. What if you could be more certain in your life that you could be building on a foundation of principles that are solid, they're gonna lead to good in your life, in the lives of others? Here's the catch. I think that our problem isn't so much that we don't understand Jesus here. I think if we read this chapter, we can understand what Jesus is asking us to do pretty clearly. The challenge is that the idea of living this way costs us something. It's going to challenge us to live in new ways. It demands something. If I'm going to take Jesus' words seriously, I can no longer just hang on to the hate and hurt that I have towards somebody else. I need to release that forgiveness in my heart that I'm harboring towards them. Somebody that I consider an enemy, I no longer get to hope that they get theirs. Instead, I'm called to look for how I can bless them. I no longer can just treat people with contempt that I don't really like. I'm called by Jesus to live open-handedly and generously, not just towards a select few, but to everyone that I come into contact with. And on and on and on the list goes. And here's the thing. Again, there's a couple millennia long track record, okay? Like 5.2 billion five-star reviews from following Jesus. Not from belonging to Christendom, not from just belonging to a certain denomination or variety of church, not just viewing Christianity as evangelicalism, but there's a proven track record of thousands of years of building upon the practices that Jesus invites me to. They're proven, they're worth living out. The question is, will you and I embrace those? Will we engage those? One more time, listen to what Jesus' words have to say. As for everyone who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice, I will show you what they are like. They're like a man building a house who dug down deep and laid the foundation on rock. When a flood came, the torrent struck that house but could not shake it because it was well built. But the one who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. The moment the torrent struck that house, it collapsed and its destruction was complete. So the question really is, how is Jesus inviting you to live differently? I believe it starts for those of us who were maybe just curious about following Jesus. We're curious about spirituality. Maybe today is the day that you're saying, you know what? I'm tired of having to create my own rules, to rely just on myself for the foundation of my life. I want to choose faith today. And if you're joining us live in our online service, there's going to be in the chat box, pop up a little hand there, and you can click on that. You can raise your hand. You can choose faith today. You can choose faith anytime at rvcc.online. Fill out that connection card and let us know. Okay, we would love to help you take that next step. Maybe you are already building on that foundation of faith. You're following Jesus in your life. You're trying to put these practices into place, into work in your life. I would challenge you to read all of Luke chapter 6, or if you want the expanded edition, read Matthew 5, 6, and 7, those chapters this week, and then just ask yourself, what is the one action? What's the one attitude that Jesus wants me to embrace as a result of hearing his words, of listening to them? That's really what this parable is all about that we've been looking at. And as we go through our series, Don't Miss It, this summer, I want you to just imagine you're hearing Jesus speak these parables as if for the very first time. And imagine thinking about and asking yourself, am I going to trust God by listening to what Jesus has to say? Am I going to put my trust in that? Okay? Because the option really is to either just hope that I'm living a good life, or I can begin actually living a good life. We hope that you'll join us and continue to explore that all summer long as we continue our series, Don't Miss It. Hey, we hope you join us next week.
Thank you so much for sharing with us today, Jeff. We've got some great things going on, and we want to make sure that you are staying informed about it all. The best ways to do that is through our all-church emails, by following us on Instagram and Facebook, or check in anytime at rainierview.org. If you are enjoying what we offer here online, be sure to subscribe to our podcast. You can catch up on weekly sermons and take a deeper look into living a life like Jesus. We answer the hard questions and how to apply scripture to your life. We invite you to share it with your community group, friends, and family. At RVCC, we believe strongly in renewal, replenishment, and the rhythms of rest. As you journey this summer making memories, adventuring, visiting friends and family, please remember that ministry still continues. In fact, some of the most important ministry happens in the summer for some departments, and resourcing those ministries is vital. As you pause your mail delivery, garbage pickup, package arrivals, and other services, please don't pause your generosity to the church. If you have been looking for the right time to sign up for recurring giving, this might be it. Quite frankly, in today's culture, we automate what we prioritize. Your committed, regular, and automated giving might be the discipline that's needed to clarify your priorities and give to God what He already owns. We invite you to start or increase your generosity this summer by downloading the safe and secure PushPay app to set up your automated gift. You can find out more about how to do that at rainierview.org/give. We'll be together for just a few more minutes today. As we sing through this next song, we encourage you to take communion in your homes. This is a time we take every week to think about all that Christ did for us on the cross. If you'd like more information about communion, you can download our communion guide at rvcc.online. Thank you again for joining us this morning. We hope you'll join us again right here next Sunday or at one of our other campuses.
And I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. A man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. And then you came along and you put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing is better than you. Now I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all. You still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. And there's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Yeah. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. Lord, there's nothing than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas